Good morning, I think I'm in heaven, dropping acid on the 227, having fun and getting paid. Lord, I love working in the ELA. Lord, I love working in the IISD. Any smokers in the crowd? Any smokers in the crowd? Well, if you get to smoking, yes, if you're cigaretting, kindly mind your careful around the meteorological station. We got all kinds of equipment tuned to some precision. Been 60-some years we've been collecting precipitation, measuring particulates and compounds in solution. Got the longest running data set anywhere across the nation. We got the longest running data set anywhere across the nation. It's been 60-some years we've been collecting precipitation. Bag in the fridge, and John will take it into town with the garbage on Tuesday, where he sends it to Toronto. Man, they got a little lab and they do good work, and friend, they can tell if you were smoking and handling equipment. Good morning, I think I'm in heaven, dropping acid on the 227, having fun and getting paid. Lord, I love working in the ELA. 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 Lord, I love working in the
Hello, bienvenue, bienvenidos, and bonjour. Welcome to the very first, and maybe even very last, depending on how this goes, Who Wants to Be a Limnologist? Now, before we start, for legal reasons, we would like to point out that this game show has absolutely nothing to do with the other popular TV show that by some crazy coincidence also happens to bear a similar name. Speaking of familiar names, you may have heard of me. My name is Samik Barth, and I am the Communications Manager for the World's Freshwater Laboratory. Today, I am moonlighting for 1 hour and 1 hour only as your host with the most. Just don't tell anyone. Before we start, I'd like to offer up a massive thanks to Matt Foster, you just heard. He was one of our artists in residence from 2019. He wrote and performed the song that you heard during the intro. It's all about Lake 227, where we release phosphoric acid into the lake to explore the impact of phosphorus on freshwater systems. Now, before we get quizzical and dive, pun intended, into the trivia, I want to hand over to Matthew McCandless. He is our executive director, and he is here even to offer you a very special IISD welcome and to get our 53rd research season started. Over to you, Matt.
Hello, thank you for joining us, and welcome to our 2021 field season launch. I would like to begin by acknowledging that I am speaking from Winnipeg in the Treaty 1 territory, the traditional land of the Anishinaabe, Cree, Ojibwe Cree, Dakota, and Dene peoples, and the homeland of the Métis Nation, and that the IISD Experimental Lakes Area field station is on the traditional land of the Anishinaabe Nation in Treaty 3 and the homeland of the Métis. This is the 53rd field season of the Experimental Lakes Area, and despite the huge challenges in this past year because of the pandemic, we are very excited to be getting back into the field, continuing the science, and even starting a few new projects. While we continue to have considerable COVID restrictions in place and will be limiting the number of people on site this year, things will be quite a bit busier than they were in 2020. Our long-term monitoring program will continue for the 53rd year, along with phosphorus additions and monitoring of the longest running whole ecosystem experiment in the world on Lake 227. Research will continue into oil and oil remediation on Lake 260, students from Lakehead University are hoping to add up to 200,000 mysis to Lake 223 to study how lakes recover from acid rain. Led by a team from the University of Toronto and Queen's, we will start a new microplastic study in enclosures in Lake 378. Students from the University of Winnipeg will continue their study into carbon cycling in the Lake 239 uplands. And finally, building on our experience with metformin in 2019, we will start a new study on venlafaxine, one of the most commonly prescribed antidepressants in Canada. All of this while we continue to develop remote education programming working with partners like the Grand Council of Treaty 3, Science North, Fort White Alive, and the Lake of the Woods District Stewardship Association, and we'll do this while maintaining one of the best science-focused social media feeds in Canada. We have a great program for you today, celebrating the science and saying a huge thanks to all our supporters and donors. We hope you have a few laughs and learn things over the next hour. But before we get to the trivia, I would like to start by recognizing the passing of one of the true giants of freshwater science, Dr. David Schindler, who passed away on March 4th this year. Dr. Schindler was the founding director of the Experimental Lakes Area and has had a huge impact on who we are today. Our hearts go out to Dave's family and friends in this challenging time. To remember Dr. Schindler, we asked one of the historians of ELA and a good friend of Dave's, John Shearer, to say a few words about how Dave shaped the ELA we have today. Thank you very much, John, for your reflections, and thank you, everyone.
I think there are two things that struck me that are really important and have had a big role in making the ELA what it has always been. One of them was that he was able to put together a team, a core team of people spanning a fair range of different scientific disciplines that could bring their own expertise to the team. And then the other thing that he would do was bring in external experts where he knew they could contribute to whatever he had underway at the time. And I think that has always been important for ELA, to have that core group that were prepared to live on site a big part of the year, to be there when things changed in the systems and to recognize that there were changes, find out what was happening, but also where you had gaps in expertise that you may have foreseen, but often just arose over time. If you had the ability to bring in other experts to fill those gaps, that went a long way towards the kind of success that the ELA enjoyed. And of course, David's own personality was such that I know as a member of his team for a number of years, and I think other people would probably say the same thing because we've discussed this from time to time. When you worked for and with Dave, you always felt that what you were doing was important. And so, you know, if you believed in the same thing as he did, which most of us, if not all of us, did, then you were willing to go a little further, spend more time, not worry about the time clock, that type of thing. You were devoted to doing the things that he was doing. And that made it a lot easier to be out there and do things. The other thing, of course, that he always did was try and make it possible for scientists who might have other commitments and not be able to be on site all the time, but to have facilities where the scientists could have a family on site for at least part of the field season. And that was a good way of getting more expertise to stay on site and you know, be around the dinner table and discuss what was going on.
Thank you very much. And again, I would like to highlight the critical role that David Schindler played in making the world's freshwater laboratory what it is today. Put quite simply, without Dave, there would be no IISD Experimental Lakes Area as we know it. Today, you are going to be helping us launch our 53rd research season with an hour of fun, trivia, videos from the field, and lots of healthy competition. Maybe even a bit of unhealthy competition too. You'll be having fun while you learn, pressing buzzers and blurting out answers while you learn about all of the exciting research that we have planned for 2021 and how, amidst a global pandemic, we are trying to make it happen. Now, most quiz shows that you've seen on the TV offer you a cornucopia of potential exciting prizes: money, a car, a tropical vacation. And you will be pleased to learn that we have absolutely none of those available for you today. Absolutely none. But what we do have is something much better. We have bragging rights, and we also have the potential for you to increase your knowledge of freshwater science, all of which will of course be delivered free to your house and is completely tax deductible. There will be 5 categories, and you will be answering via Zoom poll. So the Zoom poll should pop up on your screen as soon as I ask the question. If it doesn't, don't panic, don't fret, and don't phone a friend. You can go to the bottom of your screen and hit the poll function and it should pop up. Even if it doesn't matter, you just guess the answer in the privacy of your own home. Now, if while we're going through the quiz, there are some burning questions that occur to you, be sure to pop them in the Q&A function that you should also find at the bottom of your screen. Vince Pallis, who is our head research scientist, and perhaps even more importantly, the owner of this rather fabulous shirt I'm currently donning, will be answering all of your questions after the game show is done. Okay, without further ado, come on down and let the games begin. Here is our first category. It's been a long time coming. Now, this is all about our unparalleled LTER, or long-term ecological research program. Not sure what that means? Don't panic, don't fret. I am going to connect you with Lauren Hayhurst, who is in the field. She will explain what the LTER program is and will give us our first question. Lauren, are you there?
I'm standing on Lake 239, which is one of 5 long-term ecological research lakes at the IISD Experimental Lakes Area. We use these lakes to reference our whole lake manipulations. We study the water quality, so that would be chemical, physical, and biological components within these lakes over time, and then we can rule out any extrinsic environmental factors that might be happening before, during, or after our experimental manipulations. So the biological factors include fish populations. I'm actually standing on the lake trout spawning shoal. We would have a net set here in the fall when they spawn, so that we can come up with lake trout abundance and inform population estimates for the species, as well as process any other fish that might be in the net. So my question is, how many fish did we handle in 2020? Is it A, 47,082, B, 62,792, or C, 24,563?
You heard Lauren. How many fish did we handle in 2020? 47,082, 67,792, or 24,563? Plug those answers in, get those brain cells working. Okay, so the most popular answer is A. Well, I know nothing. I'm going to have to hand back to Lauren to give us the answer.
If you guessed A, you'd be correct. We handled 47,082 fish, mostly minnows, in 2020.
Fabulous. Thank you, Lauren. Okay, now let's head back to the field for our second question. We have Lee Renchuck, who has a very special question for us.
ELA has published a ton of research over the years. Approximately how many papers have been published using ELA research since 1968? Is it A, 565, B, 1,360, or C, 2,100? And for a bonus, what is the most cited ELA paper of all time?
Thank you, Lee. Okay, since 1968, when we first opened up, how many papers have been published referencing our work? We've got 565, 1,360, or 2,100. Of course, you've got that bonus question too, which is the most cited. Well, again, no one knows better than our researchers. So Lee, I am going to hand back to you to give us our answer.
If you guessed B, 1,360 papers, you're right. And in total, there are almost 94,000 citations of those papers. And for the bonus, the most cited paper of all time is, of course, Schindler, 1977, The Evolution of Phosphorus Limitation in Lakes, which was published in Science.
Thank you, Lee. Okay, it is a busy day at the site because we are heading right back now for our third question. Ken Sandilands has something very important to ask us about our research into climate change. Please take it away, Ken.
Collecting our data since 1968 has taught us a lot about climate change. Which of the following is true? A, significantly warmer winters in Northwest Ontario. B, IISD-ELA lakes are getting darker. Or C, fish in our lakes are getting bigger.
Let's see what we have here. Okay, which of the following is true? A, winters are getting significantly warmer in northwestern Ontario. B, our lakes are getting darker. C, those little fishies are getting much bigger. Okay, so A and B are fighting it out. The answer is actually B. IISD lakes are getting darker. One of the things we've discovered in our research into climate change over the last 53 years. How did you do? How are you doing so far? I have got all three right so far because I have the answers right in front of me. But we are going to move on from LTER and we are going to ask the question on everyone's lips. Plastic? Fantastic. To set us off and to explain one of the major research topics this year, I'm going to hand over to Mike Rennie. Mike, take it away.
To truly understand plastic pollution and tackle it successfully, we need to know more, especially about their impact on freshwater lakes. Plastics are everywhere, and you can probably see why. They're durable, relatively inexpensive, and versatile. But in Canada, we only recycle 10% of our plastics, creating 3 million tons of waste every year, some of which breaks down and ends up in our freshwater lakes. That's our water supply. We already know that in aquatic systems, organisms can swallow plastics, which may lead to reproductive issues, behavioral changes, and even starvation. But to truly understand plastic pollution and tackle it successfully, we need to know more, especially about their impact on freshwater lakes. That's why at IISD Experimental Lakes Area, we're conducting experiments, safely adding microplastics to lake ecosystems and seeing what happens to the lake and the food web it supports, from algae to fish. Once we know more, we can work directly with governments and industry to develop policies that will protect our freshwater from plastic pollution.
Thank you, Mike. Okay, I hope you had your eyes and ears peeled because the next question is based on what you just heard. How many tons of plastic waste are generated in Canada each year? Mike already gave you the answer. Is it A, 1 million, B, 3 million, or C, 10 million? Okay, we've got some B's and C's, A's not proving too popular. And in fact, if you did answer A, you are completely wrong, because the answer is B. 3 million tons of plastic waste are generated in Canada each year. Looks like most of you got that one right. Okay, so before we started the research, we tested our lakes to see if any plastic was already present there. When we did that, what was the most common source of microplastics that we found? Was it A, fibers, B, fragments of broken down harder plastics, or C, films mostly from plastic packaging? Okay, you are not messing around here. Looks like fiber is in the lead. And of course, you are completely correct. Yes, fibers were the most commonly found plastics in our lakes before we started our research. Okay, and last but not least for plastics, in Canada, which sector generates the most plastic waste? Is it A, residential sector, homes, for example? Is it B, construction, renovation and demolition? Or is it C, institutional, commercial and industrial sectors, universities, stores, manufacturing, etc.? What do we all think? A, B, or C? Well, I see that most of you went for C, and I see that you are correct, because the answer is indeed C. Congratulations if you got that one right. Okay, let's leave plastics aside for a second and let's turn to our very third category, the drugs in our fresh water. Okay, this is another major research project for us this year. And to explain exactly what it is we mean, we've got Jose Luis Rodriguez Gil, or Pepe to his friends, to explain the research. Take it away, Pepe, please.
Have you ever thought of what the environmental impacts of these compounds may be? Antidepressants are a lifeline for millions of people around the world. This is especially relevant now during COVID-19, when prescription numbers for these vital drugs have actually increased. But have you ever thought of what the environmental impacts of these compounds may be? Remember that a large portion of any medication that we take goes through us unchanged and may ultimately end up on our freshwaters. This is why it's especially important for us to fully understand the impacts of these compounds at the ecological level, from the algae to the fish. Are these compounds changing the way that animals behave? What are the ecological implications of those changes? At the IISD Experimental Lakes Area, we're safely adding these compounds to our lakes so we can monitor those effects and answer some of those questions. Once we have those answers, we can empower our governments and industry to develop policy that will ensure that our ecosystems stay safe from any possible impacts that these compounds may have.
Thank you, Pepe. Now, he mentioned venlafaxine. That's a commonly prescribed antidepressant that we will be working on. But what is not true? So which of these is not true about that drug? A, it is it is one of the top 5 most consumed drugs by Canadians aged 25 to 65. B, it has a half-life of only 5 hours in humans, and therefore its exposure to the environment really doesn't last very long. Or C, it is commonly found in the environment in concentrations up to 1,000 nanograms per litre. C is not proving very popular at all, is it? B seems to have taken it, and of course you are correct. That is completely incorrect. B, venlafaxine does not have a half-life of only 5 hours in humans. Okay, next we are going to hear from Heather Jovanovic. Now, she is one of the students from the University of Manitoba who will be working on this project. So let's hear more from her about the research and our second question.
Hi everybody, I'm Heather. I'm a master's student at the University of Manitoba, and I'm lucky to be one of the students heading out to ELA this summer to do some research. I'm going to be working on a project studying the ecotoxicological effects of venlafaxine. in a boreal lake ecosystem. So Lake 114 has been identified as the lake that we're going to be using for our research study. So my question for you is, what other experiments were conducted in Lake 114? Was it A, the impact of mercury, B, research into birth control pills, or C, a study into selenium?
You heard Heather. Lake 114, that's the research lake that we will be using, but we have used it before. What for? To discover the impact of mercury on freshwater systems, the impact of birth control pills, or in fact the synthetic estrogen that's found within, or C for selenium. Seems like C has it, but only Heather has the answer.
The answer is C, a study into the effects of selenium.
There you go. You're a very, very smart bunch. Very smart. Okay. Last but not least, for our questions on antidepressants. Now, speaking of venlafaxine, should we expect to see the same therapeutic effects in fish as in humans? Okay, what do you think? Is it A, yes, when we should expect to see similar physiological responses in both humans and fish? B, not at all. Fish brains are very different to human brains, and so we should not expect to see similar results. And C, my absolute favorite answer of these, no, fish have fabulous noses. They can just smell the venlafaxine and swim away. I'm going to give you a bit of a hint. The answer is not C. So don't even bother wasting your vote with that one. And you should be very proud if you chose B, because the answer is indeed A. A, yes, we can expect to see the same physiological responses, from at least similar ones in both humans and fish. How are you doing? Winning? Yeah, we're all winning. We're all winning here. Okay. Fourth, what's our fourth category? The Great Lakes of Africa. So you've probably heard of the Great Lakes here in North America, but did you also know that there are Great Lakes of Africa? And if you did, maybe you don't know too much about them. Well, I do now, because this year we teamed up with an organization called ACARE to share skills and knowledge about the two sets of Great Lakes. And in fact, we are going to head over the massive, massive pond in between those Great Lakes now to hear from Angela Nankabiwa, who will explain more about our partnership and what she is doing for ACARE. Angela, can we hear you loud and clear?
I'm Angela. I come from Uganda. I'm a research scientist at NAFIRI, a fisheries research institute in Uganda, and my research interests center on algae dynamics, fisheries, and impact. I'm very glad to be coordinating the IISD African Women in Science program, because it provides a platform to strengthen the long-sought contribution of African women in science. In fact, IISD is looking at the needs, interests, skills of early career women scientists in Africa to grow this so that the generations after now, we have a strong force that can tackle issues in the Great Lakes. In fact, IISD is a baby of ACARE, and together with IISD are looking to grow these skills of these early career African women scientists, provide mentorship, leadership skills, and all those that are necessary to take the Great Lakes to a whole new level. IISD-ELA, I wish you the best and I congratulate you on a new research season. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Angela. Okay, so Angela was speaking to us from Uganda, where she is from. Now let's test your knowledge. Which of these following lakes does not reach Uganda? Are we talking Lake Victoria? Are we talking Lake Tanganyika? Or are we talking Lake Albert? Lake Tanganyika seems to be popular, but Lake Albert is encroaching. Okay, all of you who went for C, congratulations, you are completely incorrect. The answer is B. Lake Tanganyika does not touch Uganda in any way, shape, or form. Okay, question number 2. According to the WHO, in 2013, what percentage of sub-Saharan Africans who were working in research and development were women? Is it 20%? Is it 30%? Or is it 40%? The reason I'm dancing is because we were planning on having music here, but we took it out at the last minute, but I can still hear it in my head. So, okay, you have gone for 20%. It's actually a bit higher. Around 30% in 2013 were of people working in sub-Saharan Africa in research and development were women. Okay, now, I was a bit cheeky when I started this category because I mentioned ACARE, but I intentionally did not mention what it stands for. So, who knows? Is it A, the African Centre for Aquatic Research and Education? Is it B, the Aquatic Centre for African Research and Evaluation? Or C, is it the African Community of Aquatic Researchers and Educators? I've confused myself with that question. A, B, or C? I'm not saying them again. Okay, A is popular. A is popular, and A is, of course, correct. We are proud and happy to be working with the African Centre for Aquatic Research and Education. Okay, now we are heading back over the pond to pronounce one of our favourite phrases. We say it often, we say it loud, and we say it earnestly. We couldn't do it without you. This is our favourite section, and this is our final category where we get to thank all of our wonderful and generous donors. But you don't get off that easily. We still have some brain-teasing and tantalising questions for you to come. But first, we want to hear from Neil and Candice Fisher. In case you're wondering, Neil and Candice are 2 of our wonderful, generous donors. And in case you're wondering, yes, Neil and Candice Fisher did change their last name to Fisher in our honour. And while this is not a requirement of all of our supporters, we're not going to say no. But enough from me, let's hear directly from Neil and Candice about why they donate and to get our first question.
Hi everybody, we're Candice and Neil Fisher, and we want to tell you why we support IISD-ELA.
Candice and I met at the University of Manitoba many years ago while studying environmental sciences, and we have a good understanding and background in the importance of fresh water for supporting our economic activities and the ecology, freshwater biodiversity, as well as the many social and cultural activities that center around freshwater. So much of our lives involves water, from our day-to-day activities to exploring Canada's abundance of fresh water by canoeing through the freshwater lakes and in boreal forest.
And as a Canadian, ELA is right in our backyard. I'll be reading the trivia question. Thanks to this year's Build Up Our Labs campaign, what analysis will ELA's labs start to run in-house this field season? A, alkalinity, B, anions, C, particulate carbon and nitrogen.
Thank you, Neil and Candice. Okay, we had a successful campaign to build up our labs. Now we're starting to run some tests because of the equipment we were able to buy. But what are we testing? Are we testing alkalinity? Are we testing anions? I practiced saying that before just to get it right. Or particulate carbon and nitrogen. Okay, people seem to be going for C. And thankfully the answer is not B because I don't know how to pronounce that word. It is A. We are this will help us to test the alkalinity of our samples. But I may have got it wrong. Let's just check with Neil and Candice to make sure I'm right.
And the answer is, the one new analysis that will transition to in-house is alkalinity. We are also automating pH, conductivity, turbidity, and TDP.
Thank you, Neil and Candice. Now, this next question is a photo question. So let's take a look at this team member. Now, some people say that this is the most critical member of our team. Those people would be me. Some people say that this is the most handsome member of our team. Again, those people would be me. But what is this team member's name? Is it A, Beaker? Is it B, Dr. Sonia Havens? Or is it C, Earl Erlenmeyer? Okay, C seems to be taking it. Although some people seem to think that this is what Dr. Sonia Havens looks like, which is mildly concerning. We do have a Dr. Sonia Havens who heads up our chemistry laboratory. She does not look like that, but you know who does. It is C, Earl Erlenmeyer. Look into those eyes. Look into those beautiful eyes. Okay, now we've come to the point you've all been waiting for. It is question 732 of the very first Who Wants to Be a Limnologist? Now, for our final question, we are heading over to our Director of Philanthropy, Louis Saint-Cyr, who has a very special message for you all, and the final question.
Hello there, Louis Saint-Cyr, Director of Philanthropy, IISD-ELA. Did you know that IISD-ELA has a beautiful endowment fund managed by the Winnipeg Foundation? At this time, we're running a campaign. Your gift can be tripled. So please be generous. Visit us online, IISD-ELA.com, and you can make it a gift for us, and it will be tripled. Thanks to Mike Patterson and Gail Asper, your gift will be tripled. I have a question for you, because it's all about playing today. What's the value of our endowment? Is it $675? Is it 10 million? Or is it just a tad over 1 million? That's the question. Please be generous. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Louis. That is indeed the question, but what is the answer? So where is our endowment fund currently sitting? Is it 675? Are we at 10 million, or are we at just over 1 million? Okay, the answer seems to be rather definitive. Again, what do I know? Let's head back to Louis to find out the answer.
Okay, so if you guessed just over $1 million, you're right. We're not done though. We want to get to 10 million, so please be generous. We will triple your gift today and for the next month. Thanks very much. Please be generous. We also created and launched the David Schindler's support for students. So please be generous. Visit us online or the Winnipeg Foundation, IISD-ELA. Thank you. Ciao.
Thank you, Louis. Okay, now we've got to the point you've all been waiting for. Drum roll, please. The winner. The winner is that guy. That one. Him. No, not you. Him. Yeah. No, not you. That's it. Him. Congratulations. In fact, we're all winners here because we just shared the 53rd research season launch, and we all hopefully had fun and shared a few laughs. Now, to wrap up, I am going to head over and pass you off to Pauline Gerard, who's our Deputy Director, and to Vince Pallis, who is our Head Research Scientist. Pauline, are you there?
Yes, I am, Sameep. Thank you so much. That was fantastic. I'm really happy to know that Earl Erlenmeyer is the most handsome person in our team. That's fantastic. I hope everybody learned something and had a little fun. I'm really curious to know if anyone got all the answers right. If you did, put your name in the chat and let us know. You definitely have bragging rights. I want to say a big thanks to everyone who helped us with the videos and questions. And of course, Sameep, You definitely have potential as a talk show host, and I have to say I'm a little bit worried you're going to get headhunters calling you right now. We don't want you to leave. We love you as the comms manager, so stick to your day job. For the final few minutes, we're pleased to turn it over to all of you. So I have Dr. Vince Pallas with me, head scientist of the IISD Experimental Lakes Area, and together we'll try and answer any questions that you might have about our season planning, the science, or your thoughts on the year ahead. To send us questions, please type them in the Q&A, which you can find by hovering your mouse at the bottom of your screen and looking at the options. To start, Vince, I know that I've had a lot of questions. I've been part of the team working on this, but people have been asking how we're managing COVID-19. This has been a really crazy year for everybody. And I thought we didn't really address it today in the questions answers, because who wants to talk about that? But I think people would like to know. So if you could start by just giving a little bit of an overview of what we're doing as far as that goes.
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Pauline. I mean, this isn't new. We were dealing with this last year, and so I feel like we have the benefit of last year's experience too. What we did was to come up with some really strict isolation protocols. So all our field people isolate before they go to the site. We isolate for 2 weeks. Once we're on the site, we have some pretty strict cleaning protocols. And then when we get to the site, we pretty much stay on site. So there's a lot less sort of in and out of the site than we used to have. And then unfortunately, that means we don't have as many people coming to visit us on the site. So our education and outreach programs are somewhat curtailed during the pandemic. Unfortunately, we're looking forward to welcoming everybody to the site afterwards. And then finally, I guess the last thing is, there's supplies that are needed for an ongoing science program. So getting those into the site and getting our samples out of the site so that they can get to our collaborators or to labs to be analyzed. We've also devised, ways to do that non-contact as well. So we've really thought about this a lot. We've had the benefit of a year trying this, and we managed to, thankfully, keep COVID out of our camp. We recognize that, living in close quarters like that, it's really a vulnerable position. So we're doing everything we can to make sure that we maintain isolation and protect the programs that we have and make sure that they're conducted throughout this year.
Yeah, it's definitely been a challenge and has taken all of our brain power to think things through, but I think we're feeling pretty ready for the field season. So this is a really good question, and one that is definitely close to my own heart. As an international sustainable development organization, I'm interested to know how the Experimental Lakes is integrating UNDRIP, which is the United Nations Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples, into its day-to-day work. And maybe, Vince, I'll take this one to start, and then you can add if you want to. So this has been really important to us, and it's definitely been a journey. Starting in 2014, when we took over management of the Experimental Lakes Area, we reached out to the Grand Council of Treaty 3, communities in the area of the Experimental Lakes Area, and just started the dialogue. We wanted them to know that we're here and we're doing freshwater research, and even more importantly, we wanted to be making sure that we're doing research that is meeting the concerns and the needs of those communities. We want to know what they're concerned about, and making sure that our research is addressing those needs. So in 2015, we started a fall feast, inviting elders and youth to the Experimental Lakes Area once a year to celebrate the science, talk a little bit about what their interests are. We have different themes every year: climate change, natural resource development, traditional knowledge. And we're really trying to build relationships. We've also done a fair bit internally too. We've had a few staff training programs. Last year, we started doing a blanket ceremony at the start of the field season. And so we're also trying to look internally and figure out what we can do as an organization to figure out how we can kind of meet the needs and work within the UNDRIP framework. I don't know, Vince, do you have anything else to add to that?
Yeah, just a couple things. Thanks, Pauline. These fine relationships that Pauline and her crew have established over the years are really starting to pay dividends now in terms of collaborative research. And that's really our goal, is to do collaborative research. So we have a couple of examples where we've delved into collaborative research with Indigenous organizations. looking at things like wild rice culture and co-culture with aquaculture, looking at concerns of our local communities regarding mercury. And we are developing a framework with Queen's University now for how collaborative research programs should actually be developed. So right at the beginning, when a program or a project is conceived, how is it that you sort of reach forward and engage with local communities and include that knowledge within the programs as they develop? That's really sort of the most meaningful way to go forward with these kinds of initiatives.
Okay, going international now. James is wondering if we have collaborative research in Africa.
Yeah, well, that was sort of the real intent of us partnering with ACARE, is to develop some of these relationships and to, allow our expertise that we've developed on our lakes, our freshwater lakes, to be applied to some of the situations in Africa. And really, this is a relationship that's in its infancy, but it's really sort of ramping up very quickly. So yes, we're doing some work. And of course, ELA has had some history in doing some work in ELA in the past. Many of our past senior scientists have worked quite extensively in Africa and continue to do so. Folks like Bob Becky, Scott Higgins, who's on our current scientific staff, has done significant work in Africa. And then even our executive director, Matt McCandless, has done work there as well. So yeah, definitely developing quickly.
So Vince, the one project that we didn't cover in the quiz show is, for those of us that have been following us for a while, kind of one of our bigger areas of research over the last number of years, and one that you're leading, which is on oil. It's nice because your background kind of tells the story a little bit. I wonder if you could talk a little bit about that work and what's happened over the last few years and what's going to be happening this year.
Sure. The background that's behind me is actually some enclosures. So ELA is very famous for doing whole ecosystem research, right? Finding out what happens in an entire lake. Of course, with oil, we can't do that. We have to confine and use smaller systems. These small systems over my shoulder are part of what we call the FOREST project, or the Freshwater Oil Spill Remediation Study. They look small behind me, but they're actually 5 meters wide and they're 15 meters long. And what they allow us to do is small model oil spills in the shoreline that we then clean up, right? We apply the oil, we clean it up. And actually what we're looking at is the residual oil, the oil that can't be recovered. How do we degrade that? So, the common way to do it for industry is to actually go in and dig out a lot of soil and a lot of vegetation, which can be a very damaging process. It can take the shoreline years and years to recover. And the shoreline is really important for the productivity of a system. So we're trying to develop methods in the FOREST project to degrade that oil in situ using the power of microbes or bacteria that are in the system. We're not adding anything, we're just stimulating conditions so that they can degrade the oil more quickly. And we think that that might rehabilitate the system even more quickly than digging it out, and then you have to deal with it somewhere else. Now, there's a couple of other projects that have sort of been spurned by this initial effort, and one of them is looking at engineered floating wetlands. So these platforms that have aquatic plants on them that afford better circulation and more availability of the oil to microbes. So these are really sort of genetic-based projects that are looking at the actual mechanisms by which those microbes degrade the oil. So we're pretty excited about that too. And this enters into our 4th year of doing some of these studies.
Yeah, it's really exciting and interesting to see what's going to happen. One kind of interesting thing about the new work that's happening this year, the venlafaxine project and antidepressants. So there was a question in the trivia about fish responding to these kind of drugs. I wonder, in this case, it's sort of a behavioral question, and whether we have the potential to change fish behavior. How is that team going to understand that or get at that part of the question?
Yeah, well, first of all, it wouldn't be too surprising if behavior was affected, right? If we think about sort of the hormone control mechanisms for all vertebrates, which fish are vertebrates, amphibians, birds, mammals, those hormone control mechanisms are conserved across the different levels of organization. So for example, a thyroid hormone is exactly the same in a bird and an amphibian as it is in a mammal. And so the control of some of these systems is quite common amongst animals. Now, this team will use small-bodied fish, so minnows, and what they'll do is look at vulnerable early life stages of these fish that are exposed to venlafaxine and look at whether or not their activity levels are changed. Why would we care about that? The survival of a fish really depends on how it does during its first year. So if you impact its ability to swim or avoid predators because its activity is lower or higher, then you can impact the survival of that individual fish. And of course, that affects the population if many, many fish are affected. So our team will use water from the venlafaxine treated enclosures, bring it back into the lab, and under carefully controlled conditions, expose the young of the year flathead minnows and see whether or not their basal activity is changed. And then when we induce a stimulus, so we transition them from light to dark, that should stimulate them to move or to remain still, depending on the transition. So if that's altered by venlafaxine 2, we have a clue as to whether or not this compound is affecting their activity rates and then ultimately their survival.
That's super interesting. Good luck. I'm really interested to hear how that goes. So there was a big announcement last week about the Science Education Center, the Center for Climate and Lake Learning, funding from FedNor, and we've also recently been approved for funding matching funds from NOHFC. So huge shout out and thanks to those two partners and donors. So, but there's a question about that here in the chat. How is the Science and Tourism Center going to affect the research being done at ELA? If there were people going into the area, will that negatively affect the research?
So, well, to answer the second question first, no, I don't think it's going to negatively impact the research. You know, the research at ELA has changed over the decades, right? So it has always been the site of high quality, world-class science. The difference in the recent decade is we do a lot better job at communicating our science, not just in scientific publications, which only a small portion of the public, of people will read, but to the public, you know, to our local communities, to our benefactors, to people that are interested in science. So the center will allow us to host more folks and be able to engage them in our science. And really, one of the best things about it, I think, is it's going to allow us to be able to host younger people who are at the stage of life where if they can get them excited in science and they decide to pursue a career in this or maintain that interest throughout their life, you know, that's some of the best things that we can do with our science, is to engage people's interest in what we're doing, and maybe to attract the next generation of scientists to train at ELA or wherever they end up.
Yeah, I mean, I couldn't agree more. Obviously, I was lucky enough to get on at ELA as a student back in the 90s, and it's definitely changed my life and impacted my life. So. Yeah. Okay, I got a question about Africa again. Are there issues affecting the large lakes of Africa similar to what we have here? And if there are significant differences, what are they?
Yeah, for sure there are. I mean, so the ELA was established because of issues in the Great Lakes concerning eutrophication, so algal blooms. And it continues to be, as Matt McCandless said in his piece here, continues to be a huge part of what we do. Of course, the same issues are prevalent around the world, especially in African lakes where you have you know, multi-use, those lakes being used for multiple purposes, you know, so they're drawing water that's also where there's a lot of runoff occurring and algal blooms occurring there, and habitat destruction for important species that are harvested there as well. So yeah, very similar issues. And that's why sort of, you know, partnering with ACARE was really a natural step, because their issues are the same as some of the ones we're working on. And so the expertise that we've developed and the experiences that they have with their lakes are part of the same kind of, you know, network of solutions.
Yeah, I think there's someone that's spent quite a bit of time working overseas as well. There's really a lot to be learned through that kind of research exchange. And yeah, I'm really excited to see where that goes. So I think I have time for one more question. A question that I often get is about the plastics work. And we had in our quiz the greatest, like what kinds of plastics were found in the kind of preliminary studies around ELA, and it was fibers. But I wonder if you could speak a little bit more about that. How much plastic is out there? You know, where is it coming from? What do we know?
Well, so I think we dealt with the amounts of plastics that are prevalent in one of the previous questions, but the fibers thing was always, at least when I first heard about it, a real big surprise to me. So we think of plastics as, bottles or broken down electronics casings and stuff like that. But the fibers is an interesting one, because I think all those, those fleeces that we wear during the fall, or like the resurgence of winter here in Winnipeg this past week, those are sources of fibers that get into our laundry, and then that can make its way out into the environment. And those plastics then we find sort of, I always use the word ubiquitous. They're everywhere, right? And Mike Rennie, one of our research associates at Lakehead University, has done a lot of work to characterize these fibers in surface waters in Lake Winnipeg. So we don't just work at ELA. A lot of us who are scientists working at ELA apply our research to other locations. That's always the goal. And Mike's done a lot of work on the plastic. So now the next stage, because we know a little bit about, concentrations of plastic in the Mediterranean Sea and in the ocean and in fresh waters around the world, what we know very little about right now, though, is what are the effects? How does the color, the size, the type of fragment affect how it gets accumulated in the food web? And then what are the effects on, energy metabolism, and whether or not there are sort of cascading effects at different trophic levels, and how that affects the entire operation or the energy flow through a system. And that's really what the plastic study is about, that will begin sort of in earnest this year at ELA.
It's really going to be interesting to figure that out and tell that story.
Yeah.
I think we're pretty much out of time. I want to thank you very much, Vince, and thank everyone for joining us today for our season launch. We're all winners, absolutely. Sameep started out saying we had no prizes, but actually we have a few. And what we're going to do is we're going to draw them out at the draw them off at the end of the day. So anyone tags us on Twitter with the favorite thing that you learned before 6 p.m. Central, you'll be entered in the draw. And our fabulous prizes include this wonderful mug, as well as these really great new ELA playing cards. They're beautiful, they're very fun to play with, and they tell a lot about the Experimental Lakes Area history right in them. So tag us on Twitter, get your social media feed on, and see if you can win. And if you can't win, that's okay. We're selling these playing cards on our website, so check them out there if you're interested. Before I close, I would definitely be remiss if I didn't send a huge shout out to all of the IISD Experimental Lakes Area staff that are on the line. It's been a super challenging year, and the success that we've had have really been because of you. It's really a privilege to work with all of you, and just huge thanks for all of your dedication and hard work, and for making this organization do as much as we are able to do. It's really amazing, and just thanks. And finally, of course, I want to finish off with a huge thanks to our donors and supporters. We would not be here without you. We've come an incredibly long way since we first took over management of the Experimental Lakes Area in 2014, and it's a testament to all of you. So thank you. Thank you for your continued support. Happy field season number 53, everybody. Follow us on social media, read our blog, and watch for our name in the news. Tell your friends and neighbors and colleagues about the good work of the IISD Experimental Lakes Area. And if you're in a position, consider a donation. We appreciate every dollar. To close us, I'm going to go back to Matt Foster, who is one of our artists in residences. And by the way, you can see Matt Foster's stuff if you like that song about 227, which I love and is such a wormhole or earworm. There's details on all of our artist in residences, including that song on our website. Just search for the Artist in Residence program. So we're going to send it back to Matt to close us off with a song that he composed inspired by his time at IISD Experimental Lakes Area at the field station. It's called Love Song. Have a great day. Have a great afternoon, everybody, and happy field season number 53.
song. You deserve it all. Dreams you never dreamed of. Every little dream you can't recall. Coming home to something. Coming home to you. Some of us have got a big bill coming. Some of us already paid. We're gonna get what's coming at the end of the day. You're gonna get what you deserve. You deserve a love song. You deserve a love song. You deserve it all. Dreams you never dreamed of. Every little dream you can't recall. Coming home to something. Coming home to you. Some of us have got a big bill coming. Some of us already paid. We're gonna get what's coming at the end of the day. You're gonna get what you